Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Gran Turismo Series Racing League Season 38 EU Division 3 Round 3. That's right, we've come around to the final round for our EU Division 3 guys, and tonight will mark us bringing down the curtain on the final races of Season 38. We've been through a lot of racing so far. We have seen highs, we have seen lows, we have seen drama, we have seen drivers come to blows, but it all comes to an end as of tonight. And what a brilliant setting and what a brilliant pack of drivers we are going to have to watch as we go over the course of tonight's racing and see who comes out on top. Now, we are running a tiny bit behind schedule in terms of our own personal programming, so without further ado, we are immediately going to hop into recalling the story so far for our drivers and introducing who's driving what tonight, as we head out to the circuit and we start taking a look at our respective drivers, and we say hello to those of you tuning in via the Twitch chat, of course, and saying hello in there. I wish you all a very good evening, and I hope you've all had a great first half to your week. Well, it's getting over the hump day today, and we've only got Thursday and Friday before the weekend. But without further ado then, let's kick off our recall of the Drivers' Championship so far. So at the moment, we have this man right here, the Portuguese driver of Vitor Knight, bringing his Aston Martin DBR9 GT1 once more for the final time for the final round here. And he is leading with 92.5 points, having had a very strong season overall so far, with a total points pool which would see him quite close to perfection in terms of getting the maximum number of points over both evenings, but unfortunately it hasn't been the case. And once again, last week Vitor was plagued with a little bit of inconsistency, which has just allowed his main rival to get into the hunt with regards to the championship places. Now you're probably wondering, well, what do I mean inconsistency? He got 2 first places in races number 1 and 2 and then a second place in race number 3. Well, what if I told you that much like his first week, where he ends up with 1 win, a second and a third place, that combination together means he is only 4 points ahead of the Welshman here of Vox Bacchus, making his way through turn 1 right now, also bringing that DBR9 GT1 with the Welsh flag theme livery. Now the gap between the two of them, only 4 points, and well, Bacchus was the one to have a good evening last time around, and by picking up a total of 42.5 points, being made up of 2 second place finishes and then a 4th place finish in race number 3, Vox Bacchus has been the closest challenger for Vitor Knight, and it's down to those two, although we do have the outsider presence of the 3rd place man here. Zernay Ismail, also bringing the DBR9 GT1 to the circuit today, is the Turkish driver on 80.5 points, and last week saw him have a difficult week by comparison with what he perhaps expected to experience, what with the fact he ended up finishing 6th in race number 1, recovered to 3rd in race number 2, and then brought home the win in the all-important race number 3, and that's why he's got an outsider's chance, we reckon, of pipping both Vitor Knight and Bacchus to the Drivers' Championship, by the fact he is 12 points down on our leader and 8 points down on Bacchus. And as we make our way away from those guys, we then come over to our 4th place man right now, the Dutchman of Jerry R. Driver, who's making his way up towards turn 3. The Dutchman in the DBR9 GT1, of course, much like all the other drivers so far, and Zernay Ismail's teammate, both running identical liveries. Now Jerry R. Driver is only 2.5 points off of his teammate, having had a consistent string of results throughout the entirety of the season so far, although last week was a little bit weaker compared to week 1, where the fact he picked up a 3rd place in race number 1, a 5th place in race number 2, and then what was a 6th place in race number 3. So things didn't go quite well towards the end, and the Dutchman will be looking to do his utmost today not to necessarily spoil his teammates' aspirations of winning the Drivers' Championship outright. Pardon me, although he'd love to obviously pip his teammate, but of course they've got to be concerned about that Constructors' Championship, which we'll come back to. So really then, after Jerry R. Driver, we do have a sizable gap to our 5th place man in the Drivers' Championship at the moment, and that is, as we try to find him round on the circuit right now, Heedless CDs, or Heedless as we're going to be referring to him from this point onwards, the Peugeot RCZ driver with the legendary little Peugeot, the little pug machine, making its way around the circuit down towards the turn 8 hairpin right now, and Heedless has been the driver who has really thrown everybody surprises, having really found form last week with a total of 36 points coming out of the 3 races, and on 65.5 points right now. He is our lead driver outside of the top 4, with the fact that last time out he picked up a 5th, a 4th, and then on top of that another 5th. A good string of results, and we're looking forward to seeing what he can do today. Although I think it's going to be a bit of a tall order, where that Peugeot being made for handling, and there's only really one sector dedicated to handling, and that is sector 3, but we'll wait to see. We then got Remwesh, who's currently sat in 6th place in the Drivers' Championship on a tally of 56 points, and we're just waiting to see whether he will be arriving, which I'm assuming he will be shortly. He's not currently at the circuit. Remwesh last time out only being able to pick up 32 points by comparison with what perhaps he could have had with a difficult race 1, which saw him finish 9th, but then he recovered to 6th for race 2 and then 3rd to race number 3. But then we hop over to Insubordinate 73, our American who's racing under the German flag, of course, bringing that Atenza once again with that much loved Atenza livery by some of our fans here, whereby he's making his way through the hairpin right now at turn 1. And Insubordinate on 53.5 points and only 2.5 points down on Remwesh, and closing that gap at a rapid rate of knots and picking up a consistent string of results last time out, albeit it wasn't in race number 2. But to recall, it was a 4th place in race number 1, a 9th place in race number 2, and it wasn't a 3rd place in race number 3. If I do my maths correctly, it was a 7th place in race number 3. Good points on the board, but he definitely was expecting some more, I reckon. We then hop down the field by a further 4.5 points to the Welshman known as Jenkster, as we can see here parked in the pits right now with the Aston Martin DBR9 GT1. 4.5 points separated him from Insubordinate, and Jenkster having a difficult evening last week in the fact that in race number 1 he was only able to pick up what was in the end a 8th place, in race number 2 a 7th place, and in race number 3 it was in the end, if we do our quick bit of maths correctly, it was a 8th place once again. So a difficult evening for the Welshman, but he'll be looking to make amends tonight. And as we carry on, we'll see that we've got Spinky Biltong next up in our lineup in terms of that Drivers' Championship. The British driver in the Jaguar F-Type, the choice that seems to have outfoxed a good number of drivers over the course of the first 2 evenings, particularly in EU Division 2 last night with Kronika Opel bringing home that Drivers' Championship in the F-Type, and Spinky perhaps trying to use a bit of inspiration from the Australian in order to win tonight. Currently on 40.5 points, having had mixed fortunes, albeit improving fortunes in round number 2 last week. What with 2 back-to-back, my apologies folks, we got all our maths wrong a little bit earlier. It was actually 2 8th place finishes back-to-back, and it was Jenks who picked up a 9th place in races 1 and also race number 3. But coming back to Spinky, 2 8th places back-to-back, and then in the final race as well, another 8th place. So 3 8th places in a row. Not perhaps what he wanted, but he got it at the end of the day, and it was a consistent point haul, and it's made him quite clear from the Polishman here of Luke, who is bringing the DBR9 GT1, the Aston Martin here, and Luke again finding some consistent form last time out, but towards the back in a good number of the races in round number 2. What with a 7th place finish in race 1, a 11th place finish in race number 2, and then in race number 3 what was a 10th place finish. We then got Tamir, who's currently sat in P11 in the Drivers' Championship on 31.5 points, and has managed to pip the Lone Racer, who will not be participating tonight. It should be pointed out he's still unwell, I'm afraid, so Lone Racer may be tuning in. If you are a Lone Racer, we wish you all the best and hope you recover soon from feeling unwell. We miss you out on the grid. But Tamer 2010, the Egyptian racing under the Saudi Arabian flag, was able to overcome the points deficit to Lone Racer through round number 2, picking up a good 16 points for what was in the end an 11th place finish, a 9th place finish, and then what was an 11th place finish, and that's enough to move him up to P11. And then last but not least, half a point down on Tamir on 31 points is the Lone Racer, who wasn't able to participate this last week and won't be participating this week either, unfortunately. As for that Constructors' Championship, as we are waiting for the start checks to potentially get underway, we are hearing that all of our drivers are being asked to give the thumbs up with regards to being able to hear our trackside steward, who is Piers today. He is our race host and organiser for tonight, so we're grateful for Piers being here, of course, because he can get things underway as soon as possible, as all of the stewarding and race organising team do their best to within GTSRL. But in terms of that Constructors' Championship, it is not quite over yet, it should be pointed out. What the fact that currently MVM Designs racing team, consisting of Zanai Ismail and Jerry R. Driver, they're currently on 158.5 points, and they've got a nice gap to team number 4 in second place, that gap being in the region of 21 points. As we get underway with our first start check of the evening. Now team number 4 of Vox Bacchus and Jenkster 86, the Welsh racing team, doing a good job and having to fend off currently team number 3 on 129.5 points, the combination of Luke and Vitor Knights, the Polishman and the Portuguese. We then got a bit of a gap, 20 points down to team number 2, consisting of Remwesh and Insubordinate. And then as we go even further down that roster, it's a little bit close between them and team number 6, who are a further 13 points down on 96.5 points, Heedless and Lone Racer. But of course, Heedless will have it all on his shoulders tonight. And then last but not least, and gradually gaining some momentum, is team number 5 of Spinky Biltong and Tamir, who are currently on 72 points and trying to close down 5th place in the Constructors' Championship. So as the lights go out and away we go, we can see that unfortunately Vitor Knight is stuck on the grid. Well, I'm not sure if he was stuck actually. No, all of our drivers are actually getting away successfully, just a lot of them being, I think, a little bit lazy in pulling off the start line there. I think all being caught out by the fact we're getting the start check underway. But everybody seems to have made it off the start line, all fine and dandy. Well, the fact, well, I say that Vitor and Luke both just very casually cruising along right now. So I'm not sure what's going on there. But as all of our drivers get in this opening lap, it's effectively an opening practice race lap, and so our drivers will take it a little bit more seriously than others. We can see that Heedless is definitely taking it quite serious with that Peugeot, making a breakaway from the rest of the field, flashing his lights as he customarily does, going into braking zones. Perhaps there's a little bit of a glitch on the input between his throttle, his brakes, and also his controller, particularly if he's on a DS4 controller, where he might be using the right stick in order to do both of those. And if you tap down the centre of it, I believe you actually flash your lights as well. We can see in the rundown towards turn number 8, the hairpin here, of course, Jerry R driving Insubordinate, not quite coming to blows, and Zanaismail looking for a way around the American German as they make their way up towards turn number 11 and flow through. And behind we can see that Tamer having a good opening run in this stuck check race. Up to 6th place is the Egyptian as he now charges through into turn number 13, and Spinky Biltong behind him. I think Spinky getting a good feel here for what it's going to be like running in the dirty air of another driver and trying to just simply get himself conditioned in, as we say hello to R Dutch 175 in the chat, and we hope you're having a good day as everybody is tuning in. We hope you're having a very pleasant week so far. Well, the sunshine gradually coming out, well, at least in the United Kingdom it is, and we've also got the sun dawning in Fuji here as all of our drivers come across the line to complete the first stuck check race. And I think we're going to be getting the universal thumbs up from everyone, although we do seem to have Luke, who's just making his way up towards the start finish line now, and then Vitor, who is apparently rally crossing his way around the circuit. We're not quite sure what's happened there with Vitor, as we say hello to Remon VM1 as he is popping into the chat right now. And we're just checking as to what's happening, and I think there is a little bit of aggravation at the fact that Vitor is not currently moving the car along, or very casually creeping along right now, and I think everybody is trying to give him the move along to say please move that car and get it across the line, because everybody is now effectively waiting on the Portuguese driver here. But we will wait and see. But that's really the opening stuck check race. Heedless in the incoming ahead of the rest of the field, and then Jerry R driver and Insubordinate rounding off our top 3, Zanaismail and Jenkster finishing off our top 5. We're waiting really for this stuck check race to conclude. We've got 2 minutes of it to go, and then we will be good to go once again in terms of potentially one more stuck check, and then qualifying should be coming at you within the next 10 minutes. Got a lot of Dutch cheering, where it's good to have the Dutch crowd supporting this man right here in the chat, where we've got Remon and R Dutch both supporting on Jerry R driver. And well, we will see what the Dutchman is able to achieve, because remember, he is in that time pressured situation at the moment. He's only got 3 races to get as many points as possible, and being 4th in the championship standings at the moment, he will be looking to not only pip his teammate, but to potentially get himself into the mix amongst Vox Bacchus and our championship leader Vitor Knight, who is still just cruising around the circuit right now. In fact, he's just parked up at turn number 1, and we're not sure what's going on here, but he does now seem to be getting on his way and making his way around the circuit, and we're just trying to find out what has happened. We're not hearing anything in the chat right now or hearing anything from our trackside organisers, so perhaps he was away. Alternatively, he's just been idling along a little bit, but he's making his way around the circuit right now. But we do have the best part of 45 seconds before this race is forced to conclude, and then we should be able to move on to one more start check, and then all being well, then we'll get qualifying underway at the hour, dead on the hour for you. And after that, of course, well, it's racing all the way to the end. You just give us a second, ladies and gentlemen. We're just going to grab a quick sip of water, and also just give the heads up to our host that we are able to see everything, and everything seems to have worked out a-okay. as we just inform our host right now. And we're just going to double check with our race organiser to make sure he is aware of the fact that we are not expecting to see Lone Racer, and we're just going to double check the situation with regards to Remwesh. And we're getting the thumbs up from everybody with regards to getting underway tonight. Everybody seems to be able to pull off the grid. I think some of our drivers will just be getting a little bit more time out on circuit right now. I mean, we do have at the end of the pit lane Luke just making his way out onto the circuit, albeit I believe he is getting a practice starting, although starting the car in second gear. Now this is a little bit different. I was going to say starting it in first gear and then teleporting. Okay, I've never seen that before in GT Sport. You get reset backwards out of the pit lane if you do try and do a practice start there. Well, that's... And we are getting confirmation, ladies and gents, that Remwesh is on his way at the moment. He's making his way down to trackside, but I think he's going to be a little bit late. So we'll perhaps expect him to join midway through qualifying. Alternatively, it could be the case that he joins at the back of the grid for race number 1. But of course, we'll try and get him in qualifying. We'd love to see him put in a qualifying lap or two and see what car he's bringing to the table. But we will wait and find out, as we have now got the best part of 5 minutes to go, as Luke gets it very wrong coming out of turn 4 there. A little bit wide on exit, going out onto that grass and sending the car off and almost beaching it into the gravel, but fortunately just keeping it together. But we are expecting Remwesh to arrive at some point during the proceedings tonight, as we say hello to Pingo Phone in the stream chat as well. And hope you're doing well, Pingo. We've had our first start check and everything's gone a-okay. We've got 10 drives so far and potentially an 11th arriving at some point, as Luke is just getting a little bit too aggressive with those track limits on entry into the hairpin, going a bit wide there over to the left, and now making his way through the side-to-side switchback, which is turns 9 and 10, the chicane of course that comes out of the hairpin. Really, we are now waiting and just counting down the clock. As I said previously, we are expecting one more start check and then we should be a go, go, go. Here is the second start check, and then it'll be a case if we count down the clock until 8 o'clock and then we get underway with qualifying. So as we pan down to the grid for this second start check, we're going to get an example of how Heedless in the Peugeot fares versus Luke in the Aston Martin DBR9. And this will be a very interesting one to see. Sets the lights out and away we go, and you can see that Heedless getting a good start. Tamer spinning the wheels very heavily, in fact, in the run down towards turn 1. And for some reason I get the feeling our camera is quite heavily glitched. No, that was just a very small bug there. And now everybody ping-ponging their way down into turn number 1, although Heedless has got clear. Luke getting sent very wide, and I think it all kicked off very quickly there as they all make their way out. And Insubordinate spit it out as he tries to rejoin by cutting across the sloped exit curve. which is that very nasty AstroTurf. But meanwhile, up front, our Peugeot driver just breaking away from the field, and I think if he can have starts like that in the race, particularly if he qualifies on pole, he will be absolutely smiling all the way to the bank. But of course, for Heedless, it's one thing to start on pole in a start check race. It's a very different thing entirely to start on pole after qualifying, because you've got to set the fastest lap. As Spinky does a little bit of off-road in there up into turn 5 and manages to actually keep the car under control, and therefore picks up a little bit of momentum on his opponent, as he's now got to defend against 4 fast-charging Aston Martins, all baying for his position as they go into the hairpin. And you can see it's all coming together, although Tamer on the inside versus Jenkster and Vitor Knight, and actually making the move stick very nicely there. Tamer seeming to feel a little bit more confident this time in race conditions, as Spinky decides to do some rallycross, and well, that is a disaster for the British driver there, as Tamer gets caught up in that, as does Luke. Vitor Knight and Jenkster get sent across turn number 12, that car spinning. Well, I definitely think it's the wacky races right now, but once this start check's over, I think everybody's going to be calming down and getting themselves composed, ready to go for qualifying, because I don't think our stewards are going to be too happy if they see a lot of that in the races. But all our drivers are now coming across the line, and we do have a freeway drag race for P number 5, and it'll be Vitor Knight who just about pips the Luke and Tamer in that sequence to P5, Spinky in P8, and it'll be Jenkster who comes out the final corner. And I think Insubordinate and Jenkster are just both casually cruising to the finish line right now, just letting the red go because of the fact they got knocked about quite a bit in this stock jet race. As we say hello to MDC and Race Division in the chat. We hope you guys are doing well. But that is it for our second stock check race, so this doesn't mean any points. Congratulations to all of our drivers for completing it. But what this does mean now is we've probably got the best part of half a minute to a minute for our drivers to do a quick hop, skip and jump to the water closet, or to have that quick comfort break, get themselves a drink, or get themselves just mentally composed, and then we'll be coming up right at you with the qualifying session. And we hope everybody is doing well. So our waiting, the clock has hit 8 o'clock, so I think we are going to be expecting our drivers to run out. And with regards to the mixture of cars we're seeing today, for those who are uninitiated and weren't here straight at the start, we should point out that we do have a lot of Aston Martin DBR9s, as has been the theme for the majority of this season. With regards to the EU divisions, as we say hello to Gomez 1988 in the chat. Gomez, of course, being one of the very fast Portuguese drivers in EU Division 2 last night, and has done very well for himself over the course of season 38. And now Luke is just deciding to do a little bit of reversing down towards where he'd most likely start in the race. I think he's getting himself in a proper practice start whilst he's got a minute, or he decides to do a 180 pirouette instead. I'm not 100% sure. But regardless, what I was going to say is the majority of our drivers tonight are bringing the Aston Martin DBR9 GT1, although we do have an Atenza in the hands of the American racing under the German flag Insubordinate, and we also do have a Peugeot RCZ as being driven by the Scottish driver of Heedless, and you're going to definitely see a lot of that Peugeot because he loves to take it to battle versus the Aston Martins. Outside that, however, in terms of other cars, we've also got the Jaguar F-Type as being driven by Spinky here, but we are waiting for one driver who is currently in the bathroom. That is Jenkster, but once Jenkster has finished in the water closet, we will be go for 12 minutes of qualifying. Now, in terms of predictions, well, given the fact that in EU Division 2 last night, if I remember correctly, we saw 37s for pole, I would suspect that, well, I was going to say we'll see 38s for pole, but we do know that Vitor Knight last time out set an absolutely ferocious qualifying time at the Nürburgring, and indeed, if I dare say it, it was the time that would have put him right towards the front of EU Division 2 from what we recall. So we may be seeing perhaps a very high 37, but otherwise I suspect the lower we are in the 38s, the closer we are going to be to pole. But it was Vitor's night in terms of qualifying last time out, but in the end he did have Vox Bacchus chasing after him in qualifying, and whatever advantage Vitor did have in the qualifying session, it did fade away a little bit when we came to the race, as Bacchus was on his heels for a good chunk of the racing. And then again, don't forget the Turkish drivers and Ismail or Jerry R drivers. We see them both lined up here in the paddock side by side at the team garage. In the fact that these two drivers, whilst they may not have the outright one-lap pace, are definitely very competitive drivers when it comes to the race. And they seem to just have that little advantage over some other drivers in terms of race pace. But we now do have 10 drivers all lined up in the pits, and I think that means qualifying is about to get underway. I think Piers might be very briefly reading everyone their rights in terms of you can do this, you can do that, you can't do this, you can't do that, and then we should be good to go. Alrighty folks, there is the change in time of day. Thanks to global warming, of course, it's getting faster and faster the time of day every time, and we're going to get the go from Pies. It is 12 minutes of qualifying, and let's see who's on the front by the end of it. Place your predictions now. I think some people are already predicting it will be Vitor Knight on pole, whereas others will be suspecting perhaps it'll be another driver instead. But as we hop to trackside then, we can see the lovely livery of that Mazda Atenza there. And indeed, Insubordinate will be hoping to spring some surprises with the Mazda Atenza, also known as a Mazda 6 if you're based in the United Kingdom. But as he pulls out of the pits then and makes his way down towards turn 1, he will be the first driver to make his way around. Now the big question of course will be, will our drivers be looking to go for multiple fast laps, or will they do a little bit of fuel burning in order to put in just one or two very fast laps? Now we did see yesterday that Chronic Opel invested in the latter option and really made it count with an absolutely monstrous qualifying lap, whereas the drivers who decided not to do fuel burning, they were quite far up the front, but at the same time didn't perhaps quite bring them as close as they could have been to Chronic. But then again, it comes down to what kind of a driver you are. If you're confident of being able to put in a very strong lap after just one or two laps, then that might be the tactic for you. Whereas if you feel you need a lot of time to get yourself settled into a rhythm to put in that absolute monster lap, like myself, that's normally my preferred approach to qualifying. I need multiple laps to find the right lap. Then you might be absolutely sending the car around lap after lap, trying to get some fuel burnt out by shifting as late as possible, but at the same time not doing any dedicated fuel burning. And we do see that we have a pack of 7 cars already coming into Sector 3 altogether. Meanwhile, Heedless, I think, has backed off a little bit just to give himself some space. And indeed, you can see what he's doing here is actually doing a little bit of tyre warming by just gradually compressing the brake pedal in order to get some heat in those front tyres and accelerating to get some heat in those rear tyres, but not overdoing it by comparison with what you could do. Meanwhile, Jerry R driver and Spinky are both doing some fuel burning. But moving away from fuel burning then, it will be Insubordinate who's going to take us round for lap number 1 of our flying laps here. He will be the first guy, and here we go. Let's ride on board and see what the Atenza man can achieve. So coming down the straight here, you can see already that Insubordinate's actually hanging the car to the centre of the circuit, but he will weave out to the outside on the left as he gets closer and closer to the braking point, braking up about 150 metres from the corner and really stamping down the brakes there and actually getting a huge amount of understeer, because I think he came down at approximately 120 metres and had to use an emergency downshift to first gear in order to get the car stopped. I don't think that's what he wanted to do, but he did get it stopped nonetheless, and credit to him for that. But that was costing the best part of probably 2 attempts trying to slam the car through the corner. But as he makes his way through 3 up into turn 4 and in 5th gear right now, you're going to see he's going to hang it on the throttle very gently and build up that power once he passes the late apex. And now up into turn 5 he goes, braking down to 3rd gear and actually getting quite a smooth line through here, though missing the apex by a little margin there, and it just cost him the ability to feel confident to get on the throttle as much as he could on the exit of the corner. Through 6 and 7 and now rushing down in towards turn number 8. Here he goes in that braking hard as per the normal 100 metre board on the right hand side, and we can see down into 2nd gear. And now through the low speed chicane here, you've got to be so patient, but he gets a little bit too aggressive on the throttle. And the car understeers wide, cost him a significant amount of time through turn 10 as he had to regain control of the car to meet the apex. He does meet the apex of turn number 11, but you can see that his rhythm has been disrupted a little bit, and through 13 he goes, and again wide of the apex. He'll be looking to tune that out in future laps, and now coming up into 14, he's going to brake into the corner, and he goes a little bit wide again. This Mazda looking very understeery on this opening lap, and I think he's going to need to look for some means to counter that understeer, because otherwise it's going to bite him over the course of the race as he makes his way down towards the start-finish line to put in his first lap time. And I think this is going to be in the region of a 1 minute 41.9. Vitor already going faster with a 39.4. Zernismal, however, with a 41.7. And then it's Jenkster, the Welshman, being chased closely by Tamer here. And I think Tamer will be given the heads up to space out a little bit, although Jenkster actually has just gone on to a lap, it should be pointed out, whereas Tamer has just set a lap, and he set what was in the end a 41.9. A good lap from Tamer, only what was 1.5 tenths off of Zernismal. And so you see the Polish driver of Luke there going second with a 140.6. And we can see that Tamer is being asked to space out for drivers a little bit, and Heedless already on the charge with a 41.2 in the Peugeot. But I think that straight line speed is going to hold him back a little bit, because remember, he's not allowed to use the slipstream of another driver in qualifying intentionally in order to gain an advantage. Now, what about Vox Bacchus? Well, he's set a 202.5 so far, so he's definitely been doing a little bit of fuel burning or just trying to give himself some space on track and warm up those tyres, so he's got plenty of time to go. And Spinky has come across the line with 47.6, but I do not think that's indicative of the time that he could be putting in. And it's the same with Jerry, our driver, who is now coming onto a lap after doing some fuel burning, I believe, and he will be a go, go, go from this point onwards. So some varying tactics right now in terms of what our drivers are looking to do, but you can see that Vitor Knight is on a mission to improve his lap already, that 39.4. He'll want that down into the 38s by the end of qualifying, I suspect. And as he comes out the final corner here, completely planted on the throttle, the traction control going into overdrive as well to get the rear of the car not to spin up. And as you can see, making his way now down towards that timing line, building up that speed, coming up into 6th gear, and it will be a 38. No, it will be a 39.6, so not an improvement, as Insubordinate comes across the line and does not improve either. But we do see Zernismal improve to a 40.1, now 7.5 tenths off of our pole position sitter as it provisionally stands. Luke, meanwhile, getting himself up onto a 40.6 and not able to improve from it. But Jenkster has now finally set an indicative lap time, a 40.8. The Welshman moving up to provisional P4 and doing a very nice job so far. And Heedless immediately responds by setting a 40.3. So this qualifying session is definitely back and forth as Vox Bacchus comes across the line and sets a 139.8, keeping Vitor honest, 4.5 tenths the gap between them two, as we see our second driver then into the 139s, although we suspect we are going to be seeing a 38 or two, as we do have some time to go in this session. But we're still waiting. We have got the best part of half the session to go as all of our drivers continue to make their way around. And well, the big question will be, as we see that Vitor Knight isn't improving too much so far, but compared to his best lap so far, that 39.4, it is anybody's game as we look around right now and see who's where on the circuit. Spinky, well, hold on a second, I think we have had a promotion from somebody. I'm not sure who has been promoted, but Vox Bacchus, I'm hearing, is on a personal best after Sector 1, and he's now coming down to the end of Sector 2, as we see Heedless has come off, but he does not rejoin onto the racing line. He gives Vox Bacchus the space, and Vox on a flying lap. He is the fastest man out of anyone in Sectors 1 and 2, and will this be enough to put him on provisional pole? I don't think Vitor's going to be expecting this, unless Bacchus makes some sort of mistake, or Vitor has something hidden away in Sector 3, the trickiest sector on the circuit, as Vitor Knight improves to a 39.0, so Vox now has got to go a lot faster in order to close it down, because remember, those two purple sectors were based on Vitor's 39.4, so I think Bacchus may not have seen that change in time yet. When he comes across that timing line, he's going to see that Vitor has improved and think to himself, oh dang nabbit, now I've got to go even faster in order to try and get myself into pole position, as we have got the best part of 4.5 minutes remaining, and Vox Bacchus makes his way up to the timing line, and it's going to be a 39.4, so he is still 4 tenths, well, almost 5 tenths down on our provisional pole sitter right now, and Zernismal making his way around, but I think a lot of drivers are going to be hopping to the pits at the end of their current lap. We can see that Spinky doing a bit of fuel burning in second gear in the Jaguar. just trying to get some fuel out of the car whilst he's going into the pits for a fresh set of boots. And now Heedless, meanwhile, in the pits. You can see the crew doing their best to get those tyres changed over as quickly as possible. He cannot afford to be sat in that pit because he will want to get himself back up the order and away from the midfield. He'll want to be on that second row where he may feel he was able to qualify. And if the Peugeot's up on that second row, well, anything can happen with the plucky little RCZ. But as we look further around the field, we can see that in the lower echelons of the order right now, it is Insubordinate who is parked up, unfortunately, on the apex of turn 5. So Insubordinate having a bit of a disaster, in fact, coming out to turn 4, having to let everybody go, and he is still waiting for another driver to come through here. So Insubordinate being the right old gentleman, the right honourable gentleman is the American, but he's just waiting right now, and he's going to need to go soon because this has cost him huge time, and I don't think things are working out for him. It's not a good qualifying session for Insubordinate at this point in time, and the Atenza team will be getting a little bit fidgety down there, hoping he can put in a much faster lap and get himself off the bottom of the field. Vox Bacchus, meanwhile, though, making his way through the final corner. It doesn't look as though it's an improvement so far, remembering the fact that he does have those 4 lap-old tyres. They're going to be 5 lap-old tyres come the end of this lap. And will he come into the pits? That's the question. It doesn't look like he is going to come into the pits, and Vitor Knight has just put on a fresh set. So Vox Bacchus going to the end on this set of tyres, improving to a 39.1, however. So Vox Bacchus has still got life in those tyres, and in fact he has closed the gap to Vitor to 1.5 tenths exactly, and it's a 1 second gap to this man. Here's Zanaismau, who is now on his out lap and will be doing one more lap in short order. So Zanaismau's got a long way to go to get onto that front row. I think he'll be feeling as though he's in a lot of competition for a place on that second row. Pardon me, as we can see that Zanaismau is only 4 hundredths ahead of Jerry Driver, who in turn is only 3.5 hundredths ahead of Spinky Biltong, and it's only a tenth to Heedless. So we have got a 4-way fight for that second row of the grid right now as Spinky makes his way onto what will be his second to last flying lap. It should be pointed out he'll have enough time if he doesn't make a mistake to do one more lap, but it is going to be very close. As behind him, meanwhile, well, we've got Heedless Cedos, who's behind him in terms on the timings, but is ahead of him on track. And we see that Heedless is on a lap right now, and we jump on board to take you through the second half of his lap as he makes his way up towards turn number 5. So getting a nice break into turn 5 by the looks of things, and you can see the mid-engine rear-wheel drivetrain of that Peugeot giving him the rotation he desires through turn 5. But then again, it's on these straights where the Peugeot just doesn't quite have that engine power, even with a change in the preset transmission. Making his way up towards turn 8 right now, and he'll be one of the latest on the brakes here, improving after sector 2 by the best part of a tenth. Although at this time, you can see making that mistake, understeering a little bit wide at turn 8, and I think Heedless, in fact, has compromised his lap to an extent as we continue to look at our timing screens where a number of drives coming across that start-finish line. But I don't think this is going to be a major improvement from Heedless as he makes his way up into turn 13, and now everybody will be on to their final flying lap very shortly, in the fact that Heedless, I think, will be one of the last drivers who will be coming across the line to start one more lap, and Heedless here not improving as far as we are aware. But Vitor now in provisional pole on a 39.0. The question will be, can he improve? And he's got Vox Bacchus, who is 1.5 tenths down in sector 1, so this is not looking an improvement for Bacchus. And what about Vitor as he makes his way down towards turn 8? Is he purple in the opening 2 sectors as he comes down here? It's not an improvement for Vitor as Zanaismau has retired from the field. That is not good news for Zanaismau, because that means we lose his qualifying time and he will be expected to start from the back. He was P3 at the time. He was P3 by only a small margin, but Luke now up into P3, and then Subordinate with an absolute flyer of a lap of 40.0 and looking to get into those 39s is the American, as we see Tamer has parked up off track. So Tamer's settling for a provisional P9, and we're just checking to see what's going on. Zanaismau, I think, has had a major disconnect because he is not in our race chat right now advising of anything else. So our host is trying to check into that as we see Subordinate already 3.5 tenths down on his previous best lap. But Vitor Knight, as he comes up to the finish line here, he does not improve, so this is not an improvement from the Portuguese, and it's 1.5 tenths. And was he able to beat Bacchus to pole position? We're going to find out. Bacchus coming up to that timing line. It's looking a good lap from Bacchus, and the Welshman says it's not enough. He does not improve. He is down in the end by 0.5 tenth, and he is going to be qualifying alongside Bacchus, what with Luke rising up to P3 of a 39.7, and Insubordinate just missing out. Well, he's still on a lap right now, Insubordinate. And we're going to keep our eyes on that as Jerry R. Driver's parked up. Spinky Biltong is just a little bit ahead of him as Zanai Ismail returns to the lobby. And I believe that he has had some sort of internet crash. But he's no longer in the lobby as Zanai Ismail, which is going to make this very difficult because I think that means he will be expected to start from the back. He will not have the opportunity to set any more laps, and we do not have a lap time for him unless we recall it from the stream. But Spinky Biltong coming down to that timing line. Can he improve from P6? And it is not an improvement. What about for Insubordinate? Does he improve meanwhile? Coming up to that line, he does not improve. And well, I think with that we've only got one more driver making his way around the circuit, and that is Jenkster. But Jenkster is on a cool down lap by looks of things, so this is not going to be an improvement. But that means the story of qualifying is Vito Knight is on pole by 1.5 tenths with 39.0, and he is parked alongside his main rival, the Welshman of Vox Bacchus. The two Aston Martin drivers separated by only 1.5 tenths in the end, and we do imagine what could be between them over the course of tonight's racing. It will be Luke, the Polish driver, who starts in P3 with that 39.7, the third and only of 3 drivers to set a 39 in qualifying. Everybody else in the 40s or higher. But a nice job by the Polish driver there, and alongside him will be the Atenza of Insubordinate, who did a very good job to improve from the back of the field onto that 40.0. And he managed to pip Jerry R. Driver, who will be starting off our third row, the Dutchman, on a 40.2, and alongside him will be Spinky Biltong, who missed out on P5 in the end by only 3.5 hundredths of a second. Well, the margins are so fine, and Heedless in the same boat, missing out on that third row, and a week kicking off our fourth row, Will the Scotsman, on a 40.254, but so close between our 4 drivers in that battle for P4, as he will be joined alongside on the fourth row by Jenkster, the Welshman there in P8, but will be looking to gain some time over the course of the race. And then it is Tamer, the Egyptian, who will be starting at P9, and we believe he will be joined alongside by Zanai Ismail, but we are waiting to find out what is going to happen to Zanai Ismail, so we will just keep our eyes on what's going. I think Zanai Ismail is being asked right now to get himself around the circuit, and well, he has not actually set a time, so as a result we're wondering if they're going to do a callback, and when I say they, I mean Pies will be doing a callback through the stream to get the lap time that Zanai Ismail set, and then set the grid accordingly. Alternatively, whether he will be required to start from the back because he technically doesn't have a time. But it's been one story in qualifying, but it's going to be a whole different story in the race, I'm sure. But it'll be this rivalry here between the Welshman and the Portuguese, as the Welshman's teammate Jenkster looks on at Bacchus and thinks, if I could only be up there to support my teammate and get a huge amount of points. But then again, Jenkster is one of those drivers who is very strong in race conditions and perhaps just hasn't seemed to have perfected the art of qualifying in that Aston Martin. As I say, it's 2 different stories, and you get a very different arrangement of drivers in terms of people who are fast in qualifying but maybe slower in the race. As we see Jerry R. Driver just trying to get himself across the front of the camera shot by revving that engine out and holding it hard on the brakes at the same time. But we are getting confirmation that this man right here, the Turkish driver of Zanai Ismail, will be starting dead last because he doesn't have an official time logged, which is very unfortunate, but we'll be looking forward to see what he's able to do. But whilst we're waiting, it's a good time, and very quickly, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already got yourself a drink or some snacks, or alternatively gone to the bathroom before everything gets underway, now's the time to do so, because I reckon we're about 2 to 3 minutes away from race number 1, if that. But we are just waiting now to get underway, and we're not hearing anything else down in the paddock. Though we do also have some grid penalties to be applied to all of our drivers here, although we're not sure who's receiving what, who's getting an early Christmas present. But that does mean we might see some chops and changes to starting positions for different drivers. So whilst we did have the grid there, do keep in mind it may be changed a little bit when we get underway. In fact, we're just being informed I can give you an update with regards to the penalties, thanks to MDC letting me know these. He's working with Pies to keep him informed. As we say hello to Lord Hush in the chat as well. I believe Race Division is trying to lurk in here, which is always good with a lurk command. But, so, with regards to drivers then. Zanizmal, who is going to be starting last anyway, has a 3-place penalty, which was handed to him last time out. We have Tamer, who has a 6th-place penalty, so he'll be starting. Well, I'm not sure how that's going to work. Those two drivers are lining up on the rear row, but they'll probably be still on the rear row by the end of it. And Remwesh, who is not racing as of the first race, he hasn't arrived yet, but he's meant to be arriving sometime tonight, has 2 6th-place penalties, which will put him right at the back for whichever race he takes part in. So 12 places in total. Goodness me, that is a lot of penalties, and we have had definitely a busy week with penalties. As we're about to get underway then, ladies and gentlemen, with race number 1. Here we go. So as we pan down to the grid then, it's Vitor Knight on pole. To his left-hand side, however, from our screen, it's Vox Bacchus, the two in a battle for the Drivers' Championship. A Luke and Insubordinate behind, but what can Zanizmal do starting right at the back in P10? And it's lights out and away we go, and Tamer jumped the start very slightly, but I think he's been able to get away with it. It was just in time. You could see he rolled forward a little bit. Very quick reactions by that man, but perhaps a little too quick. But Vitor Knight getting the start of Vox Bacchus, and Bacchus immediately going for the mother of all lunges into turn 1. And Vitor has to collect the car, but gets taken off with him. And what it means is all of our drivers now come back onto the circuit. We can see that we have got a completely different leader in the form of the Polishman of Luke, who goes defensive into turn 3, quite heavily defensive. And that is going to cost him all of his momentum and cause him to go wide out of turn 3. And Spilky Biltong, the Jaguar driver, is now up into first place, but he's got a very fast charging Aston Martin behind him. And in fact, he's got multiple Aston Martins all trying to find their way through, as we see Luke on the inside, and he's having to defend versus Jerry, our driver, and this may give Spinky an opportunity to break away. Insubordinate not really moving from P4 so far, as Tamer clips the back of Vox Bacchus' car and goes into the wall out of turn 5, and Vitor Knight back up into P5 already, and charging after our race leaders as they all come down to turn 8. He's on the inside of Insubordinate, and he gets the move done. It was very tight and narrow there. You could see that Jerry, our driver, probably had Vitor Knight on his mind as Vitor went in there very deep, but he managed to get the job done. And behind, we see that Zanizmal is up into P7, battling with Vox Bacchus, who triggered that instant at the start from what we gather. And the Welshman has got past Zanizmal, and Heedless down in P9 right now, but in this battle and using the handling of the Peugeot to try and catch up. But what we can see as they all come up in towards turn 14 for the first time asking, Jerry trying to find a way down the inside of 14 of Luke, as Insubordinate gets a little bit of snap oversteer there, exiting out of turn 14, but as they all charge down towards the timing line to complete lap number 1, it is Spinky Biltong. Hold on a second, we have only got a 1-lap race here. This was meant to be a 6-lap race. Well, that's a little bit of a disappointment because I think everybody was hoping it was going to be a 6-lap race. Well, folks, that's a bit unfortunate. Well, everybody's going to see that as a bit of practice for the race to come. There we go, there's confirmation that was not meant to be race number 1. I think Pies made a very slight mistake in getting the lap numbers organised. So I think everybody's going to be asked to ready up immediately, and we're going to go again. Here we go again then, folks. So this time this is the real race 1, not the fake 1-lap race 1. The real race 1. Go, go, go. So as we pan down to the grid once again, it's Vitor Knight on the right, Vox Bacchus on the left, and behind them Luke and Insubordinate. But Zernizwell getting a second chance this time. What can he do from the rear of the field? And how about Spinky and the F-Type from P6 in the midfield on the right hand side of the circuit? Free back from the front. And it's lights out and away we go once again, and all of our drivers getting a clean start this time as they all charge down towards turn number 1. But you can see that Vitor Knight feeling a lot of pressure for Bacchus as they make their way down there, and Bacchus swinging to the outside this time, looking for a cutback and trying to get Vitor Knight to go very deep, and he does go very deep as we see everybody going, well, a lot of drivers going charging off at turn 1. But the damage is done up front in the fact that Vox Bacchus getting into the line of Vitor Knight and making his way up into P1, and Jerry R Driver in P3 right now. He's gained a lot of places where a whole concertina of drivers going off on their cold tyres and brakes at turn number 1, and Jerry R Driver up into P3, and now he's got the charge of Spinky Biltong, who's moved from P6 to P4, 2 places gained as Heedless comes braking into turn 5, flashing those lights I think because of his brake pedal, and we can see that Spinky not taking any notice of them. But there we've got a drag race now between our Jaguar and Peugeot driver, and I think that Jaguar is going to have the legs initially, but as they make their way down towards turn 8, will we see a move from Heedless up the inside? No, we will not, but we will see a move on Luke by Zernizwell, who has moved up into P7 with a standard move up the inside into the turn 8 hairpin. You'll love to see it. Meanwhile, up front, Vox Bacchus and Vitor Knight being closed in a bit by Jerry R Driver and Spinky Biltong, and we can see that Heedless is keeping in as well and going for the move up the inside of Spinky into turn 13. You normally see it with a better handling car, although there was a little bit of contact, but I think they'll get away with it this time as they make their way up into the final corner for the first time of asking, and we can see that Jerry R Driver is keeping on the rear of our 2 lead drivers, but Heedless with that little battle with Spinky has fallen back off the pace a bit. So after 1 lap, it is Vox Bacchus and Vitor Knight up front, battling all the way down the straight once again down towards turn 1, and we're going to stay with them because it is side by side as they make their way down towards the turn 1 hairpin, and we can see that Vitor has got the overspeed because of the slipstream down there, but Vox Bacchus going as late on the brakes as possible and parking it up on the apex with Jerry R Driver behind in P3. Spinky going off at the hairpin for P4, but he's dropped down to P5, P6, P7 as he rejoins behind a whole group of cars as Vitor Knight looks to the inside of Vox into turn 3. Not a place to overtake, but it's a good place to try and put a driver off as we can see that Heedless is up into P4, behind him Insubordinate recovering to P5 after that weird start where we saw so many drivers go charging off, and then Zernizwell in P6, and then we've got a sizable gap at 2.2 seconds to Spinky Biltong, who's in P7 right now and trying to catch back up after a good start. Jenkster and Tamer battling into turn 5. A good move by the Egyptian going up the inside, but Jenkster does have the cutback, and it'll be all about the momentum as we see Spinky burn his penalty, and it is a charge down towards turn number 8, and Jenkster is going to find himself on the inside, but I think Tamer's got the legs on him as they make their way down into the corner, and it's going to be Jenkster who has to back out of it. And we just heard, ladies and gentlemen, that Zernizwell is moving up the order. Here's a replay of what happened. So as he is coming down into the turn 8 hairpin in, you're going to see he's going to go for a move up the inside of Insubordinate. In fact, he goes to the move in the end up the inside of Heedless because Insubordinate made the move on Heedless, and it was a 2-for-1 special. Insubordinate opened the door up and Zernizwell took the advantage, but we can see that he's got that penalty and he will need to burn it as he comes out the final corner. But meanwhile up front, hold on a second, what's happened to Vox Bacchus? He's dropped all the way down to P3. So whatever happened to Vox must have happened after the hairpin. He's dropped all the way down the order. He was our leader. He must have got it somewhere wrong, perhaps on the chicane coming out the turn 8 hairpin, but he's dropped down to P3, and Vitor Knight now is breaking away. 1.7 seconds is the gap between him and Jerry R Driver, and Bacchus is already closing up to the Dutchman, the Welshman, by a sensational rate of knots, closing up as Insubordinate in P4 doing everything he needs to right now to pull away from Heedless and chase after the Welshman and the drivers ahead, of course, as we see Zernizwell right now really getting into the rhythm in P6, and how much further out the grid can he move over the course of race 1? Well, he's only really on to the 3rd lap, and it means we're not even at halfway distance yet, and he could gain more positions as we see Jenkster continue to be in a battle with Luke and Tamer for P7. It's a three-way battle, and Spinky Biltong will try and get into the mix a little bit as well, as we see Tamer going a little bit late on the brakes there up into turn 5, just trying to get in the way of Luke, but not trying to cause an incident, of course, just trying to keep to that inside line to make Luke think about opening the door up, but Luke does not respond this time. I think Luke's got more more eyes ahead of him than he has behind him, as he's looking to make the move up the inside of Jexter up into turn 8, and I think he's got it done, has the Polish driver. But did he go a bit too deep as Jexter swings it back round the outside through the chicane, and Jexter is back up into P7. Brilliant battle in between the two as Jexter holds off the Polish driver just for a little while now, but the Welshman will have to have eyes in the back of his head at all times here, because Luke is definitely feeling very comfortable with the composition of his car. The two DBR9 drivers being very closely matched. Meanwhile, Speaky has made it past Tamer, it should be noted, but Tamer is looking up his inside into turn 14, but Speaky closes the door. A nice defensive move by Speaky, using the Jaguar there calmly and sensibly, but you can see that Tamer has so much momentum out of the final corner in the acceleration zone. He just puts the throttle down and he's already out drag racing Speaky across the line as they make their way up towards lap 4. Who's going to be the winner of the breaks here, folks, of the battle for P9 as it currently stands? They come up towards turn 1 and Tamer's on the inside, Speaky on the outside, and under braking, Speaky going a little bit deeper, feeling confident on those brakes, but he's still got to give that space on the inside, and they're still too wide as they come out of turn 1, but Speaky finally gets the advantage through turn 2. Meanwhile, further up front, we can see that Vito Knight pulling away, and Backus has cleared Jerry R. Driver at the end of lap number 3, and now on lap number 4, turn 5, he's already pulled that gap out to 1.6 seconds, and it's 2.7 seconds between Backus and our race leader. Jerry R. Driver, however, being very gradually reeled in right now by insubordinate. I think the Dutchman may just be struggling a little bit at this point in the race, just getting the car settled down and keeping that pace going. He is working it as hard as humanly possible, of course, but you can see that the Atenza behind is really coming to life as we go deeper and deeper into this opening sprint race. Of course, we've only got 6 laps here, but it can all happen with 2 laps to go after this one. And we see Heedless in a bit of a no man's land at the moment, driving in P5. He is gradually being reeled in by the Turkish driver Zanay Ismail behind him. Zanay Ismail 1.3 seconds the gap between the two of them on average as they come through sector 3, but the Peugeot having the upper hand in the final sector, of course, with it being a handling sector, but it will lose out massively on the straights, and particularly in sectors 1 and 2 where we've got a lot of acceleration zones that are quite high intensity. But we'll wait and see how it plays out, as I can report that we have still got Jengster ahead of Luke. And as we ride on board with Luke's car here, we're riding on board from the hood of the Polish driver's Aston Martin. We can see that with that overspeed, heading down the start-finish straight onto lap number 5, I think Jengster's either going to go defensive or he's going to simply say, you know what, Luke, take the place and we'll come back a little bit later. Well, Luke swings out of the last possible minute, maximising his usage of the slipstream there. And as they come into that braking zone, he's got to be wary of the fact he's got an overspeed, and he goes a little bit deeper. Jengster cuts back on the inside, but he hasn't got the momentum as Luke was able to get the car stopped. And nice work by Luke there. And I think he's gained the place for the time being. As we can see now, Speaky is trying to get into this battle for P7, and Tamer 2.5 seconds behind in the last of our running positions in P10. But looking for an opportunity to get himself off the back of the pack, of course, as we note that the battle between Jerry R. Driver and Insubordinate is closing up now. The gap has dropped down to half a second, and we can see back from Jerry R. Driver's car that Insubordinate is really building some momentum here. He's very gradually looming in the rearview mirrors of Jerry R. Driver as they come through turns 8, 9 and 10, and Insubordinate feeling so much more confident on getting the power down coming out of the turn 8 hairpin. You can see the difference. Once that Aston Martin, of course, is able to get the power fully down, then it starts to really pull away. But that Atenza just has so much acceleration in the opening couple of gears versus that Aston Martin, and there's so much more confidence in terms of being able to deploy that power. But then again, it's a tit for tat, it's a trade-off here for a trade-off there, and we can see that neither driver really losing ground right now, although Jerry R. Driver will be feeling that pressure as they make their way onto the final lap. And he's already pulling over to the right hand side, going defensive early on, trying to break a little bit of a toe here. As we can see, they come onto lap number 6, and Jerry R. Driver doing a little bit more weaving down the straight. He'll be given a little waggle of the finger there by a race steward probably by the end of this one, but it's okay for now so long as he's not doing it too close to Insubordinate, and Insubordinate not able to gain too much down the straight there this time. As we look further back, we can see that hold on a second, somebody is into the wall. What has happened to Luke? So Luke, I think, just getting it all sorts wrong. We only caught the tail end of that as he was coming out of the final corner and then got even further wheel spin and just put it into the wall. So Luke's dropping down to the back of our order, making his way onto the final lap. But meanwhile, I can say that Vito Knight is still clear of Backus by 2.5 seconds. And really, the big question now is who is going to come home on the third and final step of the podium for race 1. As we can see, Jerry R. Driver really under a lot of pressure right now as we ride on board with Insubordinate's car, looking forward, of course. And you can see a face full of Jerry R. Driver. And well, I think Insubordinate won't want to face another Dutchman for much longer. He'll want to put his face in front of the Dutchman instead. And they come into the braking zone for turn 8 for the final time. And Jerry R Driver literally parking it on the apex there. He knows Insubordinate will be stronger off that corner. He's trying to compromise it. And I think the damage has been done because Insubordinate does get a little bit of snap oversteer coming out of turn 10. And as they make their way into the final handling section, well, unless there's a mistake from Jerry R Driver here, I think Insubordinate will not be gaining that position now. Jerry R Driver, I think, has done enough to hold him off. As we can see, meanwhile, up front, Vitor Knight right now, well, he has led this one, and he is going to be bringing it home. It'll be the first win of the night, going to the Portuguese, and furthering his ambition to win tonight's Drivers' Championship. 1.6 seconds in the end separated him and the Welshman of Voxbackers, but there'll be plenty more between them, and Jerry R Driver holds on the end for P3, just ahead of Insubordinate, and Heedless Days will be coming home in P5 ahead of Zernizmal. Jenkster will be holding off Spinky Biltong in the end for P7. Spinky looking very competitive in that Jaguar, and then it will be the Egyptian of Tama coming home in P9, keeping it together all the way to the end. And then last but not least, but really struggling with the car right now, is the Polish driver of Luke, who makes his way onto that start-finish straight to complete race number 1. And as he comes down here, I think he's just going to gracefully come across the line. Congratulations to all of our drivers, of course, but most importantly, congratulations to our race winner, Vitor Knight from Portugal. So a brilliant race number 1, although you've got to feel for Luke, who was doing a very good job until that mistake towards the end there. But here are your final standings, subject to any stewards' inquiries, of course. Vitor Knight bringing home the race win by 1.622 seconds over Voxbackers. The Welshman finishing ahead of Jerry R Driver, who rounded off our podium a further 4.5 seconds down the road. Well, actually, I should say 5 seconds down the road. Fourth place going to Insubordinate. He won't feel too displeased with that, knowing that he has got the pace, that he finished where he started, and he'll be starting in the same location once again, and he was able to put a lot of pressure on Jerry R Driver at the end of the race. And Heedless rounding off our top 5 there in the Peugeot RCZ. Voxbackers picking up the fastest lap in race number 1, a 1:38.998. A very fast lap. In fact, the fastest lap we've seen all evening so far, faster than our qualifying pole lap of that 39.0 by Vitor Knight on lap number 6. And we will just double check to make sure we save the replay again. We get that replay paranoia kick in. As we take a quick sip of water, of course, and then we will be good to go once again for race number 2. Well, it's 5 points difference at the top so far. Well, the fact that Vitor picking up 1 more point than Bacchus there, but that shows you how close it is. And thank you for the update there, Luco, in the Twitch chat. It'd be grateful if you can give us continuous updates with regards to it. But right now, everything looking as though it's gradually coming into the favour of the Portuguese here. But remember, his main championship rival is parked next to him in the paddock. It's so close between the two of them, and anything could happen over the next 2 races. And let's say, for example, Bacchus were to finish ahead of Vitor Knight in race number 2, and perhaps Vitor was to finish 3rd, then that gap would really come down, and then it opens up all sorts of possibilities in race number 3. It is not over yet. But the real shocker there, and the real one that should be mentioned, was the fact that Luke had a very strong amount of floor on the Polish driver, and well, if it weren't for that mistake, he would have definitely been right up there in the mix in the midfield, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what he's able to achieve from the back going into race number 2. As we notice that we have got Insubordinate making his way out onto the circuit, and Insubordinate having a very solid race, as we come to know the American to have very solid races over the course of season 38. He really has been that driver who, if you could depend on anyone to finish in the mid-pack towards that podium, up in that top 5, not necessarily on the podium, but he's always there no matter what. It's this guy right here, and he does have a rival in the fact that he does have this chap who's part of the pits, the Scot of Heedless, who's been doing a very similar and stellar job. The two drivers doing fantastic work, as we see in subordinate practice at the start there, but Pies says no to that and decides to change the time of day as we get ready for race number 2. So all of our drivers will be readying up once again, and then we should be underway. I think really the big question will be, in terms of race number 2, is do we expect backers to try something a little bit different going into turn number 1 if he can get a similar start or a better start from Vitor, or does he try to play it safe? Because of the way things played out on the race number 1, he had that advantage, but in the end he got caught out, I think by a mistake of his own doing, but this one he'll need to nail. We're just watching Vox Bacchus make his way around the circuit right now, making his way through turns 6 and 7 down in towards turn 8. And he'll definitely be thinking to himself, right, I wasn't able to draw first blood in race number 1, I've now got to try and pull back the advantage that Vitor Knight has pulled on me through race number 1. Of course, it's only an additional point. It's a 5 points difference between these two, as Vitor Knight's out there practicing as well. But every point, every half point will matter so much as race number 2 is about to get underway. Who will be on pole at the end of it? So as we pan down to the grid once again, much like race number 1, it is Vitor on the right, Bacchus on the left, but this time it's Jerry R driving insubordinate behind them. Watch out, however, for Luke, who started from the very back. What can he do from P10? And it's lights out and away we go. We saw Tamer there getting a jump start, and he will have to wait a couple of seconds. But up front, Vitor immediately going defensive versus Bacchus, much like in race number 1. But this time, Bacchus will be on that inside. Vitor going very deep on the brakes, way too deep on the brakes, in fact. And Bacchus is up to P1. It is a repeat of what we saw in race 1. Vitor being caught out by that braking zone, and it means that Bacchus is up into P1. Jerry R driving P2, and Vitor Knight already finds himself in a battle 3 wide into turn 3, and that was close to curtains there, as Insubordinate had to back out of it, and indeed Vitor had to back out of it to a degree versus what was the driver of Zanaismau as they make their way through turn 4 and up into 5, and you can see already that Vitor, like a man possessed, is trying to find his way back into that fight for the race lead, but he's got Spinky Biltongo over him, and Spinky will see the opportunity. He will want to take that scalp, and he's going to go for it. Is the British driver as he makes his way down towards turn 8 behind Vitor. Will he go to the left? Will he go to the right? As we see Heedless gets the move done on Zanaismau for P3, and Vitor having to defend, and Insubordinate going for the move on the inside of Spinky, and that got a little bit rough and tumble there, and he's had to back out of it. As behind them, Insubordinate getting a bit of a tail slapper as well, and spinning out at turn 10. That's very unfortunate for the American, but he'll get it back under control in short order, as we see that Heedless right now up into P3, and the little pug that could is charging, and Zanaismau having to go heavily defensive up into turn 14 versus Vitor Knight. The Portuguese will not be denied his podium as a minimum, and as they come to the end of that, you can see that Vitor already out dragging Zanaismau despite being in even machinery. as they make their way down towards the timing line. So after one lap, it is Vox Bacchus ahead of Jerry R. Driver, followed by Heedless Sea Days, and then Vitor Knight and Zanaisval battling for P4. Vitor having the edge right now in the drag race down towards turn 1. Vitor on the outside, Zanaisval on the inside. Who is going to be the best on the brakes here? It's Zanaisval on that inside, but he's not close enough as Vitor gives him the space to go for that inside line, but Vitor slinging it together from the outside position and now up into P4. P6, Speaky Biltong currently, followed by Luke, who's moved from P10 to P7, 3 places gain on lap number 1. The Egyptian of Tamer in P8, and insubordinate after that mistake coming out of turn 10 in P9, and then it's Jenkster. Well, what on earth has happened to Jenkster? We're not sure, but the Welshman down in a lonely P10 right now, 10.5 seconds off of insubordinate, the next man up track from him. But we can see that battle is raging on, and Zanaisval and Vitor coming back together, in fact, and Zanaisval is back up into P5. How did that happen? Well, so coming out of turn 4, what you're going to see, I think, here is that Zanaisval is going to go for a move on the inside into turn 5. And Vitor, well, I think there was a little bit of a push to pass there from Zanaisval. I think Vitor left the door open, but Zanaisval saw it as a massive opportunity to send it up the inside. And I think Vitor's now going to see this as an opportunity to do the same into turn 11. Didn't quite pay off, and in at 12 and 13, Vitor's in the wrong place to try and go for the cutback, or is he? As he goes to the cutback into turn 13, and he gets it done, but you can see Zanaisval immediately coming back. These two literally playing bumper cars with one another, and well, Vitor has gone off the circuit. He's going to have to very gradually rejoin, and that was a near miss of the Portuguese running off that AstroTurf bank curve there, but I think both drivers are going to get somewhat of a warning as they go on to race number 3. But right now, leading his way all the way to race number 3 is the Welshman of Vox Bacchus, 3.3 seconds ahead of Jerry R. Driver, and 1.4 seconds is Jerry R. Driver ahead of Heedless. And Zanaisval right now doing everything he can to hold off Vitor Knight, as we see that gap has opened up to the best part of 1.4 seconds, and it's now coming back down again after breaking through turns 1 and 2. The gap already coming down at a rate of about half a second a sector based on what we're seeing on our timing screens, and this is phenomenal stuff from Vitor to be trying to come back. But of course, Zanaisval proving to be a very difficult customer to overtake. Meanwhile, in the battle for P6, it's worth noting that Speaky Biltong is being reeled in a little bit by Luke, the Aston Martin driver behind the Welshman, not behind the Welshman, behind the Brit. And we see that Luke looking to the inside into turn 5, but more of a distraction move than anything solid. And Speaky just takes that natural racing line and now makes his way around down towards turn number 8 for the 3rd time of asking. But meanwhile, as we see things continue up front, Zanaisval closing on and Heedless right now. Heedless struggling a little bit for pace in those power sectors, but this is the sector, of course, where he will be ahead, as we can see that Spinky, hold on a second, what has happened to Luke? We've got a glitch on our timing screens there. Let's just see if there was any contact between the two of the drivers. So I think there was contact, but Luke lifted out of it immediately, realising it was a push to pass. That's why we had the glitch in our timing screens. But meanwhile, in that battle for P3, we see Zanaisval and Vitor both catching up to Heedless, and Heedless not in the slipstream of Jerry R. Driver, but he's done enough as Heedless just to pull a little bit away from Zanaisval to give himself the space of 1.5 tenths in terms of that slipstream zone from Zanaisval. For reference, folks, it's 3/4 of a second the slipstream zone in GT Sport on the real setting. That's what we run here, and you can see that Zanaisval is having to think more about going defensive versus Vitor Knight than having to worry about Heedless. And Vitor coming back for another move, and this is a move quite a way back into turn 1. Zanaisval goes to the cutback here, and these two are just not giving up. It is brutal, the battling, and we love it as Zanaisval gets back ahead of Vitor Knight with an undercut, and Vitor will have to try and find another way past, but I'm sure that Zanaisval wants every single point he can get, and Vitor will want the same. And I think this is well for the constructors, where both Jerry and Zanaisval know they need to get as many points as possible and get as much over Vitor and his teammate as humanly possible as well right now. As we see Vitor getting the run out of turn 5, and Vitor squeezing Zanaisval as much as possible. And I think, oh my goodness, the two of them just will not give one another more than literally half a car with space through the corners. And this battle is going to go down to the wire as we see Vitor trying to close it from the inside. Oh my good lord, there is contact between the pair of them. And I think they're both going to be getting quite a telling off come at the end of this race, because that is a bit too far and a half now, ladies and gentlemen. gentlemen. In my experience of watching sim racing and real world motorsport, that's when you call both the drivers in and tell them to put on the boxing gloves instead. But meanwhile, Vox Bacchus up front, 6.7 seconds ahead of the rest of the field and just sprinting away off into the distance. But the big question now will be, in terms of that battle for P2, Heedless catching up to Jerry R driver, but notice how that gap is opening up on the straight here, despite the fact that Heedless is in Jerry's slipstream. That is the deficit of the Peugeot straight line speed, but Heedless doing a very good job of keeping Jerry honest, and if he can do this for 2 more laps, I mean, Vitor has cleared Heedless by quite a distance, but, well, not Heedless, cleared Sir Nigel. I think Sir Nigel's finally realised, you know what, it's not worth it. We're only both going to end up in the steward's room and being given a stern telling off, but you can see that Heedless right now, if he can keep up this pace, will hold off Vitor Knight and potentially be able to go for P2 by the end of it, and this is something that Heedless would be very happy with right now, because he is mounting that pressure on Jerry R driver. Oh no, and I say that, and then Heedless goes wide at turn 4, and he's now got to try and rejoin with the dirty tyres into 5, and this puts him right on the warpath with Vitor, who is the man on a mission to try and get himself back up the field, and it's going to be very close. And now, of course, Heedless has got to try and keep Vitor behind him before they get into the handling sector so he can deploy the strengths of that Peugeot, but Vitor has got the momentum down to turn 8, and I think Heedless at this point is just going to give him the space to try and come back at the end of the sector, because I think he will have seen in his rear view mirror the carnage that happened between Vitor and Zanaismount, and will think to himself, you know what, I don't want any part of that. And you can see already how close Heedless is running to the back of Vitor Knight through this handling section. That Peugeot just having so much more handling capacity than the DBR9 ahead of him, but the problem is he's got to be close enough to capitalise on that as he goes very deep on the brakes into turn 14, I should say, something Vitor can't do with the Aston Martin's brakes being a little bit heavier by comparison. But then you see, as we get onto this straight right now, that's where Vitor will be able to pull away to a degree as they make their way onto that final lap of race number 2. In the battle for P8, we should point out that Tamir is holding on to P8 for the time being, but he has got Insubordinate gradually closing him down. Will the Egyptian be able to hold on for one more lap? Well, as we go into turn 1 for the last time of asking, then we see that Vitor doing enough right now to stay ahead of Heedless, and Jerry R driver getting a good run there out of the first corner by comparison with Vitor, pulling away by the distance of 3/10, and I think Vitor has got his eyes in the rearview mirror right now, because Heedless has definitely not given this one up, although he does run a little bit wide out of turn 3, and is that a half-second penalty? Say it's not so for Heedless. It's not a half-second penalty by literally a hair's width, but he will have that on his mind that he can't afford to run wide and pick up a penalty now, as Vitor cuts a sizable chunk of the apex of turn 5, and I think it's getting very difficult for Vitor right now. He's got to find his composure. A half-second penalty for Vitor, and he goes to burn it, but I think he'll have to burn it in the run to the finish line right now, or find a way, because he's not going to be able to burn it here, although he does try and burn it into the hairpin, and Heedless picks up the spot, and I think Vitor's going to have to try and send it back on him now through the rest of this sector. But remember, this is the sector where the Peugeot will shine, and Heedless has only got the best part of 3 more corners to go. But meanwhile, coming out of the final corner to pick up the win in race number 2, it is Vox Bacchus, who will cut to shortly, but we're staying for this battle for P3, and Heedless leaving the door open on the inside, but he's going to sweep it to the outside and hold off Vitor. I think it'll be a drag race to line, but your race winner, ladies and gentlemen, is Vox Bacchus by 9 seconds ahead of what looks to be Jerry R driver, as Heedless in the rear of your picture is drag racing with Vitor. Can the Peugeot hold on as Jerry picks up second? Can it hold on? And in the end, he holds on by a hair's width to pick up P3, Zanaismount in P5, Spinky Bilton in P6, Luke in P7, Tamer in P8, I think, as they come drag racing down towards the line here. Is it going to be the Egyptian, or is it going to be the American? I think the Atenza just hasn't got it here, and as they come across the line, it is Tamer in P8, Insmorda in P9, and then Jenks. It's been a very, very disastrous race for the Welshman, but I'm sure he will bounce back from this one. It just hasn't worked out, and he has got one more race to go. A P10 this time around as he comes across the line and completes our race in order. But of course, congratulations to all of our drivers, but to our race winner in particular, Vox Bacchus from Wales. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we save the replay, here are your final results subject to any stewards' inquiries for race number 2, EU Division 3. Vox Bacchus bringing home the win there by a margin of 9 seconds ahead of Jerry R. Driver and Heedless Sea Days rounding off the podium there. The Peugeot makes it onto the podium, holding off Vitor Light by the window of 6 thousandths of a second. The little pug that could finally does, and it should. Vitor Light in P4 and Zernismal in P5. Our fastest lap being another 38, an even faster 38, a 38.897 as set on lap number 2 by Bacchus. Well, the Welshman is definitely hitting his form, and I believe because of that now, it is literally only 2 points between Vitor, who's leading by 2 points over Vox Bacchus, and it will all come down to the final race. But what a fantastic race that was. I think some bits of it right now, well, let's put it this way. I think for some drivers down the paddock right now, their pit crews will be telling them just to calm down, go outside, go kick a bucket or something. I'm particularly thinking of Zernismal and Vitor because that was an incredibly heated battle between the two of them. And I think they're both going to be called in front of the stewards later on. But nonetheless, where they fought, it was the opportunity for Jerry R. Driver and Heedless to finish on the podium and for Bacchus, of course, to run away with the win there. And we've still got one more race to go, the 12-lap feature race, where we have got that mandatory pit stop. Now, of course, the big question will be, with respect to that mandatory pit stop, when do you take it? Well, we saw last night in EU Division 2 that our race winner in the end, Chronic Opal, who did have a degree of a pace advantage over the rest of the field by looks of things by default, but nonetheless, he pitted right at the end of lap number 1 after a disastrous lap number 1, which saw him drop all the way down to what was, at the time, P7 if I remember correctly, and then he pitted, he came out in P9 and went charging after the rest of the field, and he won the race in the end by putting on the fresher tyres and just going for it. And perhaps it may be the case that Vitor may think to himself, or Vox Bacchus may think to himself, if I replicate that and I feel comfortable on the tyres, I could get myself all the way to the end. Or alternatively, perhaps they'll do the opposite, which is what we saw from Picciola, whereby they went the entirety of the race on a single set of tyres, but forced their mandatory pit stop to go right at the last possible moment, which was lap number 11, the final possible opportunity for you to take it. We also did see a number of pit stops midway through the race, and indeed we did see a number of drivers opt to not change their tyres around here. The tyre degradation at Fuji does not seem to be as high as it has been at other circuits, and that's all going to play in. Now, personally, if I was racing in this one, I would probably look to not take a change of tyres for the simple reason that I feel quite comfortable driving a car on worn tyres, but for those who do not, it could be invaluable. But remember, you lose a lot more time taking on those tyres in the pits, compounding your pit stop already. But we're just going to take a very short breather before we get that transition to race number 3, and we've got 12 more laps to go to see who is going to be our drivers' champion for EU Division 3. So we have had the change to the 12-lap race, and we've had the change of time of day. So I suspect race number 3 will be coming to us any moment now, probably within the next minute. As we see everybody gets readied up for the last time of asking this season. And a shout out should be given to Tamir. Now remember, Tamir joined us back in season 37, if I remember correctly. And well, he was in the lower division at the time, which I think was EU Division 2. And he found himself finishing right at the back in, I think, most of the races, if not all. But See how far he's come already in the course of one season, picking up some places over the course of the individual races and not being the guy to always finish last. So it's great improvement from Tamir, and we look forward to seeing what he can do in future seasons of GTSRL. But he's definitely improving, and it's good to see him moving up the order very gradually, but all the same, 1 or 2 places gained is something to be pleased with. Here we go then, ladies and gentlemen, race number 3. It's about to kick off, and who will win by the end of it? So as we pan down to the grid then, this time it is Vox Bacchus on the right and Jerry R. Driver on the left. Behind them, Heedless and Vitor. But watch out for Jenkster starting in P10. What could he do from the back of the field? And it's lights out and away we go, and all of our drivers getting a relatively good start. Tamer bogging down a little bit, but not jumping the start unlike the previous race. I think being cautious this time. But Bacchus has got a good run off of the start line, and we can see that Vitor already going for a double move into turn 1. He wants to be on the heels of Bacchus immediately, and he's got it because he knows if he finishes P2 or higher and Bacchus wins, then as a result, Bacchus will not pick up the Drivers' Championship. Vitor will win by half a point, and he needs to achieve that wherever possible. Of course, he'll want the win over Bacchus because it will be driver's pride. But as they all make their way down through turn 4, we can see Zanaisbal at the inside of Heedless already, and we've got the 2 teammates of Jerry R. Driver and Zanaisbal together now, P3 and P4. As they all come down to turn 5, and we see that Speaky is following that chase for P1 as Insubordinate has moved up the best part of 3 places from the back of the field, 2 places from P9 to P7, and Jenkster has almost followed suit as Tamu has dropped down the order. But Bacchus right now has got a lot of Vitor in his rearview mirror as we see Heedless going for a move up the inside, late on the brakes versus Zanaisbal, but it wasn't enough as there's a little bit of contact from Speaky, but Speaky immediately lifts out of it. No malice there whatsoever as they make their way through the final sector for the first time of asking, and we can see already how our top 3 Aston Martin drivers, in fact our top 4 Aston Martin drivers, are pulling away as Speaky looks for a move around the outside into turn 13 versus Heedless. But Heedless in return, well, he's holding on defensively right now, and this is where the Peugeot thrives. As meanwhile in that battle for P8, we see Insubordinate being attacked very heavily right now by Luke, and Insubordinate up into P8 by looks of things as Tamir spins out. That's very unfortunate, clipping that AstroTurf out of the final corner, but he'll get that car righted as we do see already a couple of drivers coming into the pits. Well, one in particular, and that's Jerry R. Driver from P6. So Vox Bacchus right now leading ahead of Vitor Knight, followed by Zanaisbal. Then it's Heedless C-Days, followed by Speaky Bilter. Well, actually, Jerry R. Driver's in P5. Speaky misses his braking point. Oh, goodness me. And I think that Zanaisbal saw that coming because he did not turn the car in, and Speaky rejoins in P5. So I'll just go back to what I was saying, that Zanaisbal P3, Heedless P4 now, Speaky P5 after missing his braking zone for turn 1 on lap number 2. Jenkster in P6 moving up the order, Insubordinate in P7, and it's Tamer in P8 ahead of Jerry R. Driver, who has come out ahead of Luke, it should be pointed out. So this has been a good trade-off between Jerry R. Driver pitting early. He's been the first driver to pit, and I think the idea behind this, of course, is that he's simply able to gain the places. And did Luke pit as well? That is a big question. I think Luke may have actually pitted as well as Jerry R. Driver there, because they're very close together on circuit right now, and they were very close when Jerry R. Driver came into the pits. But meanwhile, up front, we can see that Bacchus doing enough to hold off Vitor for the time being. Of course, Vitor does not need to beat Bacchus in this race, as far as we are aware, in order to pick up that Drivers' Championship win. But you know that competitive edge of Vitor as we look back from Bacchus's car here, and it will be Vitor wanting to get every single point, and he'll want every single win because he loves to pick up those accolades. And as they make their way through the final corner, then for the second time of asking, Vitor getting ever closer to the back of our race leader right now. But I don't think he's close enough to pounce this time, as Bacchus does get the better run initially out of the final corner, and the slipstream will give Vitor the ability to pounce back, but he's going to be very far back come the end of that run into turn 1, or at least we suspect. As we can see that meanwhile, further back Insubordinate holding off Spinky for the time being, but Spinky getting a little bit closer. But in that battle down into turn 1, does Vitor go for a move? He decides against it. And what about that battle for P5? Well, Spinky is on the inside. He has got the slipstream and he is past Insubordinate. But Insubordinate coming to the inside instead, covering off the attempt and going for a cutback very early on in the corner. But Spinky cuts back into the cutback there, and we can see that Spinky is now up into P5. A very nice double move there from Spinky in order to get it done. And the Jaguar driver now pushes on into what is effectively P6 on circuit, with Jerry R driver pitting so early on. Jerry R driver of course being in P8, with Tamir coming into the pits from what was P8 at the time, and Luke chasing after Jerry. Now we look back to our leaders right now. We can see that the battle between Bacchus and Vitor has spaced out a little bit, but meanwhile that battle for P5 rages on, and Spinky holding off Insubordinate for the time being. But Insubordinate will be looking for a way back past the Jaguar driver, or does he just play it smart and decide, you know what, you're faster than me now in the race, but I know I'm going to be a little bit stronger than you later on in the race. That seems to be something Insubordinate's good at calculating, and I think he will be having that go for his mind right now. He won't be too worried about the Jaguar driver. As I say that, Insubordinate gets it sideways coming out of turn 10, a repeat of what happened in race number 2. Insubordinate have difficulty, and now Jegster is all over his 6, and will Jegster go for the move here? Well, I think Insubordinate's got enough momentum to keep ahead of Jegster for the time being, but we will wait and see as they're coming up towards the final corner. And Jegster, does he look for a move up the inside? He's not quite got the momentum to do it, so he's not going to swing for it. But meanwhile up front, as they go to lap number 4, it's Bacchus still ahead of Vitor. The gap's still half a second, and closing down under slipstream conditions down into turn 1. And we can see that Bacchus right now not really putting a single foot wrong, although Vitor is getting closer and closer under braking, as meanwhile Zanaismal in that P3 position and Heedless chasing after it in P4, albeit Heedless 2.8 seconds down and losing time on Zanaismal very gradually over the course of each lap, as we do see that Spinky, oh, I say, what has happened here to Insubordinate? That was a very sideways run through the first corner. Well, coming down towards turn 1 then, you're seeing that Insubordinate's on the inside versus Jegster on the outside. Jegster had the momentum here, and I think he felt he got it done versus Insubordinate. But does Insubordinate go for the move on the inside? No, he doesn't. In fact, he sort of carries a bit too much momentum, and I think Insubordinate tried to kill the momentum from that Atenza, and he couldn't get stopped in time, so in the end, he had to force the steering wheel to the inside, and that's what spun it onto the apex. But Insubordinate, they're doing a very good job not to clip the back of Jegster, who's now up into P6 on track. As we can see that Vitor getting ever closer to the back of Bacchus, and well, I think Bacchus now will be feeling that pressure as he goes a bit deep into turn 11, and Vitor is getting that momentum lined up, and Bacchus going defensive into 13, which is not where you really want to be, especially with Vitor over your back, because he will go for that move once he's got that momentum and he knows that door's there. And I think Bacchus would do well here just to simply drive it safe and instead focus on getting those lap times in. Let Vitor make the mistakes in Bacchus' shoes, not the other way around. But of course, from Vitor's perspective, he'll want Bacchus to make the mistake, as we see Bacchus feinting a move into the pits and then coming back onto that racing line, perhaps hoping that Vitor would instead come out the slipstream, alternatively going to the pits by accident. It's no accident to go into the pits here at Fuji. You'd have to be an absolute numpty to make an accident of going into the pits. We would have used another word there, but we're not going to. As we see Zanaismal in P3 right now, making his way through the first corner, once again on lap number 5, and just having a peaceful time of it is the Turkish driver, albeit he's not able to catch up to the race leaders right now, where I think he would like to be, but he's not able to be. Now, the big question, of course, at this point in the race, what about our P8 driver, Jerry R driver, who you'll remember pitted on the opening lap? Well, he's 27.5 seconds down our race leaders right now, and not really gaining too much on them, it should be said, as he almost goes a little bit wide there out of the first corner. I think Jerry R driver pitting early has worked out in getting clear space on track, but he doesn't quite have the pace of the leaders, so I think this is more of an endeavour. Hold on a second, what has happened to Vitor Knight? He's a very long way back. So coming up into turn 5 then, I think we're going to see Vitor make a mistake here on the apex. And does he just simply get on the power too soon? No, he picked up a half-second penalty for mounting the apex of turn number 5. So that's why the Portuguese has dropped back by quite a margin. And that means there is now a 1 second gap between him and Zanaismal. So how the tables have turned. And remember, Vitor only needs P2 if Bacchus wins to secure that Drivers' Championship. And he will not want Zanaismal getting in there. And Zanaismal is the one driver he does not want to fight, because of how those two came to such bloody blows in race number 2, and they may do so again here. But Zanaismail getting a bad run out of turn 14 at the end of lap number 5. Now, does either of the two drivers pit? Neither driver pits, and they carry on their merry way. And well, as they make their way charging down here towards the first corner, once again we can see that the gaps are opening up between our drivers right now. As into the pit from P5 comes Spinky Biltong. He's got the space to do it, and I think this is his time to shine by taking that pit stop. But of course, where does he come out in relation to this man right here, the Dutchman, a Jerry R driver? We're going to keep our eyes on Jerry, who's also got Luke, who pitted early with him. So these two working together in a way in order to make their way up the field. Where does Spinky come out in relation to them? Well, Spinky is coming out the pit. And as the camera pans around, we can see that Spinky has cleared Jerry, our driver, by going for that later pit stop. So it hasn't worked for Jerry as he sees Spinky ahead of him. And Jerry's now got to get the move done on track as Insupporter also comes into the pits and makes his way into the parking slot right now and doesn't take a change of tyres. Instead, he makes his way around. Now, to give you an update, of course, on tyres, as we do see a driver who seems to have got it. Well, I think Tamers had a little bit of a mistake at turn number 13, because we did see him sort of parked up there. And in fact, the dirt on the tyres, it's going from good to bad to worse for the Egyptian in race number 3. But taking a look at the status of our drivers' cars right now, you can see that Bacchus there with relatively good trim on his tyres. Vitor taking a little bit more out of his front tyres with the heavy braking by comparison, and that mistake on lap 1, of course. And Zanaismail in a very similar position, driving quite aggressively on his fronts to catch up to Vitor now. And we can see that Heedless, meanwhile, tyres in a similar condition to that of our race leader Bacchus. And then we come down to Jenkster in P5, who's got the cleanest of the tyres of anybody so far, doing a very good job of saving those tyres. As then we've got our first driver who did not take tyres on in the pits, that's Spinky Biltong. And behind him is Jerry R driver, who did take on tyres in the pits, as did Luke. And Insubordinate, who went into the pits and didn't take tyres in P9, and then Tamir, who took tyres on and just having a bit of a disastrous race right now. But we look forward to seeing more of him in the future. As Zanaismail has come into the pits, and what was P3? Now, will he change tyres? He goes for the tyre change here, does Zanaismail. Now, this is a gamble, of course, because remember, that is an extra 4 to 5 seconds that he spent stationary in that pit. And the question will be, where does that bring him out in the competition with the other drivers around him? Well, he has cleared Spinky completely. He's got Jenkster a little bit ahead of him, but Jenkster will need to pit, so I think he's going to be fine there. Heedless, who is 13 seconds up the road from Zanaismail, I don't think Heedless has got enough of a gap. And Vitor, who is a further 8 seconds up the road, so it's a 21-second gap between Vitor and Zanaismail. What this effectively does, it forces Vitor into a situation whereby he has to either put in absolutely monstrous laps, alternatively pit immediately now and put a fresh pair on if he's planning to put new tyres on, because we are over the halfway point of the race now, and that means that really we're now looking for drivers to come into the pits and not change their tyres at all, which if Vitor plans to do that, then he's safe for the time being. But of course, he's got that 4.8 second gap to Bacchus. So we are waiting to see how it's all going to play out, folks, with the gaps having spaced out quite a bit on circuit right now. And, well, the big question will be, who is going to flinch out of our remaining top 4 drivers who have yet to pit? My prediction would be that it's probably not going to be Bacchus. Bacchus will feel he's done this race a service and he can just lead it to the end. He doesn't need to put any more pressure on himself. Just run this race all the way to the end. Let everybody else react first. As we can see that Heedless in P3 not pitting either. What about Jenkster? Does he dive into the pits? No, he does not. So nobody deciding to dive into the pits right now. And Zanaismail will look to try and gradually close down that gap to Vitor. It will be a very gradual close down those fresh tyres, and we can see that he's not really closing the gap to Bacchus so far after his first lap on those new tyres, the gap being 27.2 seconds to the race leader. But we'll see how that goes over the coming laps, as we've got a battle for P7 behind, and it's Luke versus Jerry R driver. Now, Jerry R driver is quite a way ahead of Luke, so there must have been a penalty burn or a mistake from Jerry. But regardless, Luke on the inside, Jerry on the outside into turn 1, and we can see that Jerry taking a very wide line, trying to find that cutback line, but Luke getting it very poised on the apex there. And now Jerry R driver's got to find a way past the Polish driver, the Dutchman, looking for the move into turn 3. It's not going to happen. It's a very dangerous place to overtake there on the inside, as we see Luke pulling away a little bit with Jerry, trying to feint that inside move, trying to get Luke to outbrake himself. But in the end, Luke says no and continues on his merry way, albeit missing a little bit of the tight apex line out of 4, but gets it solid into 5. I think we are going to see some more sparks between these two drivers before the end of tonight. They have been quite closely matched, albeit Jerry R. driver now finding himself on that back foot, as we see in the battle. Well, no, it's not a battle, my apologies. Heedless Seeday is coming up behind Tamer to lap the Egyptian driver, who is on lap number 7, whereas we are on lap number 8 for the lead lap. But of course, I think Heedless will be grateful if he can get a little bit of slipstream off of Tamer down the straight, because that Aston Martin is going to absolutely charge down there by comparison. And Jenkster, well, he'll be wanting a little bit of that slipstream action a bit later on. As we see that battle for P7 is continuing. No drivers coming into the pits at the end of this lap so far, and I think that's everybody clear of the pits who's yet to pit, as Luke now makes his way out to that start-finish straight. Only 4 more laps to go. Can the Polish driver hold off the Dutchman? The gap between them at 6 tenths, and will start to close, of course, with Jerry R. driver picking up the toe off the back of Luke's car. They charge down across that timing line then onto lap number 9. Jerry R. driver gradually building up that momentum, but he's quite a way back still. He's not getting as much of a draft as perhaps he would have desired. Luke moving to the inside and parking it on the middle of the circuit, and Jerry R. driver decided to back out of a potential lunge to the inside line there. What of Luke making the apex very tight for the Dutchman behind, as is his right too. But now as they make their way up towards turn 3, Jerry finds himself the closest he's ever been, but not able to effect a move into turn 3, so instead he'll wait perhaps for turn 5 as they both make their way through 4 right now. And of course, from Jerry's perspective, he has to contend with the fact he's got to do his own racing line, plus also the understeer that's invoked in his car from the dirty air of Luke's car ahead of him, as we can see that Jerry R. driver not gaining enough and actually backing off a little bit there, looking for a new attack avenue in due course, I reckon. So the gap has opened up to 1 second between the two of them, and Jerry R. driver will start to build another push towards the end of this lap, going on to lap number 10. Further down, well, we can see that Insubordinate in a lonely P9, not really seeing too much action at this point after that little mistake early on, but soldiering on nonetheless. And now really the big question will be who's next to pit, and I think we are due for a pit stop from Heedless. The Scotsman is pulling over towards the pit, and in he comes with the Peugeot. They're going to service the car, but does he take the tyres on? Of course, that'll be the big question, as Jenkster, who is battling with Heedless for P3, my apologies, excuse me a second. Not sure what happened there, folks, just started coughing. But Heedless up into P5, also down to P5 and still in the pits. And where does Spinky come out in all of this? Well, by the looks of things, Heedless in those pits right now, and he comes out, but I think Spinky's going to be very close here. And as Spinky pulled up blinder through the early pit stop, he has, although Spinky has gone very deep there, I think, to try and give Heedless the room, and he now rejoins behind Heedless as they make their way. Only 3 laps to go between these two, and that battle is now going to rage on, as we see the battle also rages on between Luke and Jerry R. driver, and Luke does not want to give it up as they go into turn 3. It'll be a battle on the brakes, and they're going side by side through 3. You don't normally see it, but they made it through it, and Jerry R. driver round the outside with a brave move. But meanwhile, Spinky on the slightly more worn tyres of his Jaguar by comparison with Heedless, who I don't think took tyres. Well, neither driver took tyres in their pit stop, and now it's a case of who is able to manage the car until the end with only 2.5 laps to go. Will it be the Peugeot or will it be the Jaguar? Let's wait and find out. We haven't got long to go, but I can assure you we're going to see plenty more action between these two before the end of it. As meanwhile, P3 Jenkster, of course, will be wary of this and will be looking to pit soon, and Vitor Knight is much further up the road. So Jenkster right now will have to do everything he can to hold on to that P3, and he will come out of pits in P4. He will still be holding on to that P4 as Zanai is now making his way up through the final corner, and in that battle right now for P5, Heedless is still ahead of Spinky. I think Spinky hasn't quite got the momentum, and Jerry R. driver has definitely cleared Luke now as Jenkster comes into the pits from P3. The crew are ready to go, and we'll wait and see whether they put new tyres on the car, as the as well definitely clears the Welshman. But what about Heedless and the Brit behind him? So what about the Scot and the Brit? How will they clear him? Well, I think they're both going to clear Jenkster as they come down to start another lap, and they have indeed cleared him. And what about Jerry R. driver? Well, Jenkster is coming out of the pits right now, and Jerry R. driver is not close enough. So Jenkster has jumped up to P6, so Jerry R. driver's early pit stop has not worked out for him, as he's only got 2 laps to go. We are on the final lap with the pit windows open, And well, it's up to our race leaders now to pit. They're the only two who haven't pitted, minus Zanaisval as far as I'm aware. And well, I think Jerry R. Driver has got his work cut out for him if he wants to get into that top 5. It's not far up the road as we see Heedless still battling with Speaky, and Speaky getting a lot of momentum, but in return Heedless getting the better traction out of the corners. And I think it's either driver's game here with only sector 3 of this lap and then one more lap after this. And both of them will want that P4, but I think they'll both be satisfied with a top 5 finish to round off the evening. None more so than Speaky, who's had the fair share of bad luck over the course of this season, and it would be a solid result for him. As Bacchus, our race leader, does come into the pits now. And remember, folks, as Vitor Knight also comes into the pits, they're grinding a little bit along the wall by looks of things. And Zanaisval at the final corner. Now, remember, Zanaisval did pit and go for those fresh tyres, but he has such a gap to Vitor Knight. I don't think it's going to be enough, as Vitor is already pulling into his box and putting... Well, he's not going to be putting tyres on at all. He's just simply going to pull off, as does Bacchus. And I think Vitor has done enough to bring it home in P2 as we go to that penultimate lap. And really, the battle now out on circuit is a P4. Heedless versus Speaky. We can see that Tamer is being used as a bit of a sleigh in terms of Heedless trying to pull himself along behind Tamer. And it's working for the time being. But of course, Tamer will be hesitant here because he's got blue flags being waved at him. As they come into the braking zone here, Tamer will need to stay out of the way. And Speaky goes up the inside of Tamer but can't gain any ground on Heedless. Heedless using Tamer as a tactical buffer there. Smart play by the Scottish driver. And now as they make their way out towards turn 3, it will be between these two for P4. Who is going to pull it off in the end? Well, I think my bet right now will be on Heedless if he can hold off just one more charge from Speaky. He's really only got 2 more corners before it turns in his favour. Turn 5, which is coming up, and turn 8. So here we go as Heedless goes wide out of turn 4. Dirt on the tyres here. He's got to get the car stopped, and Speaky goes to the undercut through the corner, and Speaky gets a little bit of a tailspin there, and it means that he's not got enough momentum, and Heedless is back on the inside. Now they're coming down to the braking zone for turn 8. Who's going to be leading out of turn 8? Speaky on the outside, Heedless on the inside. Heedless goes late on the brakes. This is customary in that Peugeot, and he's holding Speaky behind him, and I think he's done enough. Heedless, oh, Speaky's going back for a move into turn 11, and he looks up the inside as Heedless goes wide there, but coming across the line, he's led this race from start to finish. It will be Vox Bacchus picking up race win in race number 3. Behind him is Vitor Knight, the Portuguese, 6.1 seconds down the road. And Zanaisval will be coming home in a 3rd place finish. As we can see in the rear of your camera shot, Speaky got it done at turn 11 with Heedless going deep. So it will be Speaky in the drag race to the line for P4. Beating Heedless by the margin of less than half a second, and it was so close between the two of them. Tamer coming across to come home in P10 on the previous lap, and Jerry R. Driver hold on to P6 ahead of Jakester, and Luke missing out in P8. Insubordinate meanwhile coming down onto that start finish straight right now. And it's going to be Insubordinate who makes his way across the line to complete race number 3. And it should be pointed out, ladies and gentlemen, as Insubordinate brings us home and brings EU Division 3's races to conclusion, that we say congratulations to all of our drivers, but most importantly to our race winner, Vox Bacchus from Wales. So as we save the replay and take a look at our race results, these are the final results subject to any steward's decisions or inquiries, ladies and gentlemen. Vox Bacchus winning by 6.1 seconds over Vitor Knight, and Zanaisval coming home a further 9 seconds down the road in P3. 4th place going to Speaky and 5th place to Heedless, who couldn't quite hold on to P4 at the end there. Vox Bacchus bringing us home as well with the fastest lap of tonight, albeit not the fastest lap in the entire evening, the fastest lap in race number 3 with a 38.964. Bacchus making it 3 out of 3 on the fastest laps there, this time on lap number 7. Now, at this point, of course, a number of you are going to be saying, well, does that mean that Vitor Knight has won the Drivers' Championship for EU Division 3? Yes, subject to any steward's inquiries. Now, I'm not saying there is going to be a demotion or anything. I'm just saying this. The contact between Zanaisval and Vitor Knight in race number 2, I suspect, will be looked at. So whilst right now it is provisional that Vitor Knight has won the Drivers' Championship over Vox Bacchus by the region of half a point, we're going to wait for the dust to settle and for the stewards to come out with their final verdict before we go and celebrate Vitor's potential crowning here. So just keep that in mind. But what a load of racing tonight. It's been fantastic racing from EU Division 3, and it's a great way to conclude what has been a very dramatic season 38 at all tiers, and indeed both across the pond in the United States from what I gather and here in Europe. As I say, I think our stewards are going to have a very, very busy weekend on their hands. Or busy couple of evenings. But we're now waiting for King of the Karts, of course. As for my driver of the day tonight, well, I must admit, I'm very torn between two drivers, and it's probably, as we get over to the King of the Kart settings, I'm torn between Heedless and Spinky, but I'm going to give it to Spinky in the end, who really made that consistency work. It was a long time coming, but he finally made it work, did Spinky. Driver of the day tonight. And MDC in the chat saying that he is taking a few days off. He's definitely earned it, has Mike, in the fact that he's been working very hard with a lot of stewards' inquiries over this season and doing a majorly good job all the way through. MDC or Mike being one of our senior stewards. Senior in terms of the level of respect he commands, not in terms of how much the stewards' inquiries have aged him over the months he's been doing them. Here we go then, folks, the final King of the Karts for season 38. Let's do our best. Starting in the back like we normally do. Doozy. Sorry, Pies. I think everyone's trying to blow off a bit of steam. I do feel bad about knocking Pies there, I must be honest. If I see him, I'm going to let him through. Oi, we're going sideways. Go on, Heedless, go! Oh, there's Pies. Oh, this is close battling between the three of us here. Gonna keep pushing Pies along. Oh, 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 whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, he lives. Okay, that was a bit of a... We'll get back in there, it's just avoiding it from spinning. Hey, Heedless, how's it going, buddy? Hey, let's go. Alrighty, it's the double toe now. I haven't got the top end. Look at Pies go. Look at that. I need to tune my cart. Well done, Pies. That was phenomenal. Literally coming out of nowhere to pick up that win. Now that was one King of the Karts to remember. That was crazy. And there's the results. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with that marks the conclusion of EU Division 3's Season 38, and indeed the entirety of Season 38 for GTSRL. Hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure broadcasting it to you, and in a couple of weeks' time, in 3 weeks' time, we will be back with Season 39. But in the next 2 weeks, we will have the time trial periods open for Season 39, and if you are looking to take part, now would be a good time to get ready to sign up. Be sure to head over to the GTSRL website, gtsrl.tv, to find out more. I've been your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember, stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, as always, stay on track. Good night.